Good evening. It is 5:30, so we're going to call the special meeting to order. I'd remind you to turn your cell phones to silent or vibrate, and then let's please all stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Chris, would you take the roll, please?
Councilmember Dalby?
Here.
Councilmember Rowe?
Here.
Councilmember Myers?
Here.
Councilmember Pope?
Here.
Councilmember Burke? Mayor Lazio?
Here. We'll need a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second. Thank you.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Councilmember Pope?
Yes.
We always give citizens a chance to comment on items on the agenda, and I do have one that was handed to me earlier. So I did invite Josh Chance to come to the microphone, and he wants to talk about item 8, so we can wait until that time comes up if you're okay, Josh. Okay, we'll do it on that number. Is there anyone else that didn't turn in a slip? Okay. Fill out a slip and we'll give it to the clerk, and we'll see that you get the chance to respond. Okay, let's go ahead with item number 1.
Acknowledge Wapello County's abstract of votes for the city general election on 11/2/2021. Recommendation: acknowledge abstract of votes for the city general election.
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dalby?
Thank you.
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Councilmember Pope?
Yes.
Acknowledgement of October financial reports and payment of bills as submitted by the Finance Department. Recommendation: acknowledge October financial reports.
Move the recommendation as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions? Take the roll.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Councilmember Pope?
Yes.
Before you go to the next one, I might, just for the benefit, I see we have some new council and prospective mayor in the audience. Each year, the city is required by state law to report an annual financial report, and that was just presented by the Finance Department. I think that would be a great tool for you to go over with our Finance Department and with Phil. Excuse me. And it is available online these days now, too. So I would just mention that for your information and future reference. Go ahead.
Approve the appointment of Jacob Rush to the Zoning and Housing Coordinator in the Planning Department. Recommendation: approve the appointment of Jacob Rush to Zoning and Housing Coordinator on or about December 5th, 2021.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Sandra. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Councilmember Pope?
Yes.
Approve the annual urban renewal report for the Westgate Urban Renewal Area, Airport Urban Renewal Area, Wildwood Drive Highway 34 Urban Renewal Area, and the Hospital District Pennsylvania Avenue Corridor Urban Renewal Area for the fiscal year of July 2020 through June 2021 for the city of Ottumwa, Iowa. Recommendation: approve the annual urban renewal reports for fiscal year July 2020 through June 2021.
Is there a motion? Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Thank you. We have with us Finance Director Kayla Mulder. Kayla, you have the floor.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. This is a report that is due December 1st on an annual basis. It fulfills the House File 2460 for our levy authority for the annual urban renewal report. For FY21, we captured TIF revenue of $557,701. For the Westgate TIF, that is $194,403. The airport TIF, it's $244,553. And for the Wildwood Highway 34 TIF district, it was $118,745. We still are a little bit behind with that Westgate TIF and the Highway 34 TIF. We should be caught up with the Highway 34 TIF and close that gap with the Westgate District because of our new valuations for this next year. But it's still probably going to take us 3 or 4 years to get completely caught up with that Westgate TIF district. And you guys have the full report. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Any questions for Kayla? Very complete report. Hearing none, I would take the roll.
Councilmember Dalby,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Myers,
Yes.
Councilmember Pope.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla.
Request for qualification responses for the Campground Shower House project. Recommendation, accept the proposal from Willett Hoffman and Associates Incorporated for professional services in the amount of $30,000 to prepare plans and specifications for the new campground shower house and authorize the mayor to sign.
Is there a motion? Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, we have Parks Director Gene Ratchig. Gene, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor. The City of Ottumwa sent out requests for qualifications to 9 architectural and engineering firms regarding their qualifications for preparing plans and specifications for the new campground shower house and office project. 2 responses were received. The bid from Curtis was disqualified because it was only an email rather than the packet of information that was specified, and also because they cannot provide engineering services. Willett Hoffman submitted the proper response, and they also have extensive experience with campground shower house and park restroom projects. Willett Hoffman is also the firm that has been selected to lead the City Hall renovation project. The contract from Willett Hoffman is attached. We hope to begin this project in 2022.
Any questions for Gene?
Just one, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
So we get the $30,000 to Willett Hoffman to do this. Are we using CIP funding to actually do the project? Okay.
Yes, we just received a Bright Ideas grant from the Legacy Foundation for $30,000, and I'm going to continue seeking out other grants in the next few months.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I would just mention, Gene, that really glad that we're finally getting this to this point. And you mentioned that start in 22, and then the actual completion will just depend on all the variables in between.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks for bringing this up. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Dalby,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Myers,
Yes.
Councilmember Pope.
Yes.
Informational item, sewer capacity. Recommendation, provide a general overview of sewer capacity review for the development on Bonita Avenue.
I'd like to recognize Public Works Director Larry Seals. We've had a number of emails, phone calls, and comments about this, both project and capacity. So Larry, you have the floor to give us some information.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. The engineering department reviews the capacity of the sanitary sewer for any significant user prior to approving connection to an existing sewer system. The first step in a capacity check process requires the department to review the line size, the grade, the pipe material. In order to determine pipe grade, actual existing pipe elevations have to be determined, which requires a field survey for elevations. This information is then used to determine the flow capacity of each segment within a reach. Once all pipe segments have been determined and the existing flow is measured and compared to calculated pipe capacity, the difference between calculated pipe flow capacity and the measured flow is the remaining available capacity within a segment. This process includes reviewing any recent capacity checks for the system to be reviewed. For the Bonita housing development, we were able to use previous field work that had been completed for the Helgerson Flats certified site project and adjusted for any future development in the area. A recent specific question was raised if Bonita sewer system would be overloaded with the addition of the housing development. Calculated capacity for this section is estimated at 1.055 million gallons per day. Current use is 0.298 million gallons with remaining capacity of 7.56 or 756,000 gallons a day. The estimated flow from the Bonita complex when fully developed, is 48,600 gallons a day, leaving an excess capacity of 707,000 gallons a day. A second issue that we were asked to review is sewer laterals along this segment. That doesn't really show up very well. What we did was just go out to Beacon to get an estimated distance between the main line that runs down. This, of course, is 149, and this is Bonita. The average distance is somewhere between 150 and 160 feet from the line to these homes. Probably the issue that we've seen, and as I understand it after talking to some local plumbers that have worked in this area off and on over the years, this is only about 4.5 foot deep, roughly. If you look at these laterals, and if you would have installed them according to plumbing code, that's 1/4 inch a foot for that distance, and you'd have over 3 foot of cover. Go to that next picture. What this creates, by the time it gets to the sidewalk and they're trying to do even a minimum grade below what's standard for plumbing, you've only got a couple foot of cover. I had reached out and talked to them, and again, there are different issues in these areas. Some of it is just buildup of grease. When you have a lateral that's in the frost line, of course, you're going to have problems with grease separating from your sanitary flow. That's one issue, along with freezing solids. The home that had been talked about online anyway has suffered problems. Over the years, it's been suggested they stick a HDPE line in and a pressure pump. There's really not a lot we can do. I mean, the homeowners at the time the homes were built decided to put that in and connect to the public sewer. That's really the fix, is to line it and put a pressure pump. I don't know if they're all having problems. I didn't reach out and talk to all the homes. But anyway, that's not a city main issue. I think it's been converted to that's a city problem. The main that goes down the highways does not have a problem. That's kind of the big picture. If you have any specific questions, if you've heard from any individual citizens, I'd be happy to answer specific questions.
Any
So
questions,
the-
Council?
Yes, so the Bonita project will not affect these properties?
No. Again, go back to the other picture. The Bonita project is their sewer is going to come out here and connect right here. There's over 700,000 gallons a day after they connect capacity left in that line. So it has no effect. I mean, I can tell you these homes, they'll continue to have problems. Their lateral must have less than an 1/8 inch of a foot fall, or half what's required. And that's what it is.
Excuse me, Larry. So all of us that own homes, from our house to the main, the lateral, that is our responsibility.
That's private.
Yes. And then, in fact, if we know our main is 5 feet deep, they're going to be in trouble if they don't have their lateral low enough to handle that.
They're probably going to continue if all the homes have problems. Now, one slight advantage is the roadway itself, the profile is coming up, so we have more cover by the time we get here. These homes, these 2 or 3 homes here probably have more cover. The lowest spot are the first homes south of the pedestrian overpass. That manhole's only about 4 foot deep, a little over. So they're going to have the least amount of cover. And it improves as you basically go uphill as far as grade's concerned compared to the main.
So if you own a home there, you need to either pump it or you're going to continue to have problems.
If your home happens to be experiencing problems, the waste that you put down has a great impact. Again, if you have a lot of greases going in and your lateral's in the frost line, it's going to separate out. I know, talking to one of the plumbers that has serviced homes in that area, that is actually the problem. They get in there and it's full of grease.
Any other questions or comments, Council? So at this point, if any individual homeowner wants to talk to you, they could contact your office and discuss how to improve that situation, but there's no plan at this point for the council to take any action tonight.
The private laterals.
Okay.
But they're welcome to call. I mean, we would provide material items and suggestions.
Okay, thank you very much, Larry. Let's move on to item 7.
Ordinance number 3187, 2021, an ordinance providing that general property taxes levied and collected each year on all property located within the Bonita Urban Renewal Area in the city of Ottumwa, County of Wapello, state of Iowa, by and for the benefit of the state of Iowa, city of Ottumwa, County of Wapello, Ottumwa Community School District, and other taxing districts, be paid to a special fund for payment of principal and interest on loans, monies advanced to and indebtedness, including bonds issued or to be issued, incurred by the city in connection with the Bonita Urban Renewal Area, the Bonita Urban Renewal Plan. Recommendation passed the second consideration of ordinance number 3187, 2021.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second. Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Okay, we have Zach Simonson. Zach, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. This is the second consideration of an ordinance that had its first consideration at the 2nd November council meeting. At the November 2nd meeting, the council adopted the Bonita Urban Renewal Plan and established the Bonita Urban Renewal Area. In order to carry out any of the projects that are described in that urban renewal plan, the city would need to pass an ordinance that would authorize capturing tax increment and using it to make economic development payments and to pay certified debts. This is the ordinance that would execute that urban renewal plan. The plan does include a number of projects, a potential development, 108 units of workforce housing, as well as possible street repair on Bonita, planning costs and legal costs for developing the plan. And the ordinance would allow us to capture the increment for any of those projects. And the ordinance doesn't commit the council to any of those projects. Those would have to be approved separately as items in the plan. This is just a ordinance that gives us the power and the ability to fund those as they're described in the plan.
Any questions for Zach?
Your Honor, I got a question.
Go ahead.
Could you refresh my memory? And I think I asked this question before. Just hypothetically, if this development that we're talking about now didn't happen and we set up this urban renewal area, what types of projects in that area could you foresee us using this TIF money on?
Yeah, so the projects that, well, the first is that we know at least one of those buildings is going to be built. So if there is any need for street repair as a result of that, that's a type of project that we would do. We could also amend this plan over time if there's a different project on that lot that is more favorable. Then we amend the plan, and potentially this would allow us to still capture increment for a different project.
There's one other thing that we have incurred costs for the project, the administrative costs, attorney fees, things like that. And that was one of the things that was in this plan to be able to recover for that. So there are already some costs that, regardless of anything with the project, that we would have.
Okay, thank you.
And there will be at least some amount of tax increment because the property was sold recently and the value is going to go up reflective of that sale. So even if there is no other activity, and we know there will be at least the one building, but even if there were no other activity, there'd be some amount of increment, which would help with those costs.
And Zach, just for the matter of record, this was prepared by Allers and Cooney, the original ordinance.
Correct.
And they've approved it and passed it back to you.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just one. Do you have a dollar amount of what's been incurred already?
Not in front of me. I'm sure we could put that together though.
Okay.
Before the next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, ready to vote? Motion's been made and seconded. Take the roll, please.
Councilmember Dalby,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe,
Yes.
Councilmember Myers,
Yes.
Councilmember Pope.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay,
Public Safety and Emergency Services Ambulance Services Work Session. Recommendation, open discussion.
well, I was going to turn it over to Phil, and I think I would like to start with Phil, and then Josh Chance would be able to make his comments. So Phil, you have the floor.
Very good. So I just wanted to, tonight, not a normal council meeting, although we did have a number of other items on here before you that needed some action. We will have our regular council meeting next week on the 7th, and that'll be the just regular routine things that weren't covered tonight. But a couple of meetings ago, there was a question by Councilman Rowe wanting to kind of get an update on where things were, the state of the fire department, and over the last year plus, we've had, excuse me, a number of staffing questions, concerns in the fire department, and a lot of that has for a variety of reasons. We've had individuals that have been off for a variety of things. We have, well, it was about 2 budgets ago, we reduced our staffing by 6 individuals. That alone itself, had some immediate impacts on the department, obviously. We had vacations scheduled, other things that through the rest of that balance of that year. And so that created shift coverage issues and needing to make sure that we had people to cover those, which created some overtime and just in general, not necessarily allowing people to have off as freely as they would maybe like in the past. So that puts a lot of pressure on the department then to make sure that, they're able to fully staff. And aside from what maybe Josh is going to mention here, I understand Deputy Chief Corey Benj has got a presentation that he's going to give, kind of help explain the staffing levels and that aspect as to minimum staffing levels. So when we have somebody that might be injured on the job or off the job, and especially for a long period of time, that puts a lot more pressure on the department as well. If people are stepping in to fill those shifts, because we really don't have a choice in the matter, you need to staff, you need to be able to protect and serve and, be able to keep the community safe. And our employees are dedicated. If there is a vacancy there, they're going to step in and they're going to make sure that that gets filled. That puts some added stress on them physically, emotionally maybe, and that can help, it can break down a body. That can cause more injuries, can cause other things. So there's a lot that kind of goes into this. Bottom line, I think that one of the things that we were looking at is how can we look to increase the numbers that we have, bring those back up a little bit. The big thing, the reason prior was revenue. We had a revenue crunch that was upon the city. In the general fund, we've got $8.10 maximum that we have to work with, and that is police, fire, general administration, if it's finance, HR, code enforcement, all of those things are under that same amount of dollars. And unless we increase our assessed valuations, we don't have any new revenue that really comes from that. And where the ambulance services comes in here, that was one of the things that was mentioned previously, talking about was there something that made sense? We do go to those calls. We do provide some on-scene support. In many cases, we might be first on scene. And even earlier this year, when there was some staffing issues, concerns with Ormix, there was a request to be able to step in and drive if necessary and help out in that regard as well. So with all that being said, did it make sense to look at that as a possible revenue source? Well, I did have an opportunity to reach out to the hospital to see what their thoughts were on this. And at this time, they're not looking at subsiding from providing ambulance services. They have the rigs, they have staffing. They, at a minimum, run 2 crews, oftentimes try to run 3 to help with transports. And in all honesty, that is really where the revenue would come from. If you're looking at profit or revenue that we'd be able to use to help offset staffing, is from the transports. And if we're not able to, or there's not an interest in partnering to take on those transports, that is not revenue that we have. And if we're only doing the emergency runs, that's, that's going to be probably pretty close to a break-even service at that point. So I think there's some other alternatives, and towards the end here, I might go into that a little bit as far as some other revenue options. I'd like to give Josh and Corey an opportunity and then take on any questions the council may have. But in general, I think that we see that there is a concern and an issue with staffing, and it's something that, we need to resolve and get up our staffings a little bit. So I guess with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor, and if you want to
Okay.
call on anyone.
Okay, at this time, I'd call Josh Chance to the mic, and he can make his comments.
All right, good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Josh Chance. I live at 313 Linwood here in Ottumwa. I've been a firefighter with the city of Ottumwa for the past 15 years. I'm also currently the Ottumwa Firefighters Union President. First, I'd like to thank the mayor and council for even considering hiring back personnel for the fire department. My goal is to give you a perspective of what we are dealing with on the front lines. I think Phil gave a pretty good description of what we've faced here this last 16, 18 months. And I just want to kind of fill in any of the gaps. So I can make a case for additional personnel just based on our overtime alone. And I think everybody else has seen a lot of the numbers, could do the same. Just since fiscal year started July till October, our overtime has cost $117,852.24 in 4 months. We're on pace to be over $353,000 this year if we keep this up. Now, our firefighters are scheduled to work 56 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, and that is our regular pay. So you don't pay overtime over 40 hours. We're scheduled for 56 hours a week at straight pay. It's a law. It's a federal law with our industry of our shift, the way they lay out. You don't have to pay overtime. We get a fleisha. So if we work so many days straight, then they give us $100 and some dollars. It depends on your pay grade, and Kayla could probably explain it better than I can. Overtime, this $117,000 that we've worked so far this year, that's the overtime, that's the extra shifts beyond our 56-hour work week. So anytime we get called into work, and in fact, we have possibly a call going on right now where I might have to cut out of here. So that's why our chief just left. But anytime we got guys off duty that call back to work for an emergency, that's an overtime pay. And then anytime we pick up a shift additional to the ones that were scheduled, we get overtime pay for that. So that's where this overtime number comes from. And I just looked at my check personally, because I don't have the breakdown of everybody's check, but since January 1st of this year, I've averaged 70 hours a week every week. And that's what it averages out to. So I work my 56-hour work week and then 14 overtime hours per week. That was just looking at my check alone. Most guys, we keep track so somebody doesn't get way ahead of the other person. So we're all on track for that similar amount of time. So this overworked schedule is having some measurable effects on the fire department and our firefighters. We have members that are getting sick and injured, like Phil mentioned. It's at an alarming pace to me. And we also have some mental exhaustion. And then I got some of the numbers here to prove what I've found. So we're on pace to have a 10% increase in sick leave this year over last year. Our on-the-job injuries, since we had the reduction in staff of 6 people, July 2020, our on-the-job injuries have increased 311%. And we're on pace right now to double that number this year. Have Having more members get sick and injured is causing additional overtime, which is causing more members to get sick and injured. And it's kind of what we're seeing. So it just keeps escalating. It's kind of a cause and effect. The physical state is, we're exhausted. I think everybody understands that. And everybody's been pretty open to listen to that. Now, for the mental health side of things, we just had a lady come in and talk to us about mental health, starts talking about some of the red flags that you might see. And I'm just going to speak for myself on this because I can't speak for everybody else. But I've noticed myself, I'm more irritable. I verbally have snapped at my loved ones. And before I catch myself, it's like it's already out of my mouth. So I have to catch myself, have to watch, kind of our attitude at home. Also, I haven't been able to spend as much time with my children's activities. When they come out and see I'm wearing my uniform on a day I'm not scheduled, Dad's not scheduled to go to work, but I come out in all blue, they just drop. Their look on their face just about crushes you. And their body language just breaks my heart. And that's how I've been measuring my family's mental health. And I imagine if you talk to the other 23 firefighters, you're going to get 23 similar stories. But here are some of the interesting facts that I found. And I think you guys would, you don't always get to hear this. So I'm glad I was able to speak. But on average, this year, since January, we're running a call every 2 hours. Every 2 hours, Ottumwa Fire Department's going out the doors on a call. A typical call lasts about an hour. By the time you go take care of the patient, we might have to drive like you mentioned with the ambulance, we might have to drive the patient back to the hospital for them, depending on the severity. And then we come back, type a report. It's about an hour by the time you do all that. Put your truck back together. Now, we had a fire earlier, and obviously it took more than 1 hour. So, but they average out to probably an hour a call. Currently, we have 3 members that are injured. And so far this year, we had a total of 4. We've had 1 come back since then, but we also lost another. So we've had 4 members injured this year. Right now, we have 3 members that are unable to work because of injuries. 3 members have left the Ottumwa Fire Department for other employment, which we were able to replace them and keep our staffing it to 24. But we did lose experience with those 3 members when they left for other employment. 1 member that was on this reduction of 6 on our layoffs, he was eligible to come back and he decided not to. And that is not included in the 3 members that left for other appointment. We had 1 member leave for PTSD disability retirement. Of all the people that's left, 4 of those were paramedics. So when we're talking about the ambulance, we lost 4 paramedics with that group. And the total number of everybody that's either off injured or have left us is 111 years of experience in firefighting, which is something that I think that we can't replace very easily. I believe, being a small business owner myself, retention of employees is very important to any employer, especially during this worker shortage like we have now. Most members, including myself, have been getting headhunted for employment from other places, and several of us have considered it changing employers. It's not something I like to hear from my guys, but every day they're getting a job offer somewhere else, and not all of them are in the firefighting field. So that's just kind of the insides of what maybe you guys don't know yourself or haven't heard. And I'm just glad that you let me fill you in on that. And if you guys have any other questions, feel free to ask now or later. You can reach out to me. But I do have information that back up the facts I gave you tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much,
All right, thanks.
Josh. I think let's let Corey make some comments too, and then we can open it up for questions.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Corey Bench, Deputy Chief of the Ottumwa Fire Department. I've put together, Ms. Mulder and I put together a presentation I'm kind of going to piggyback on what Josh said about the kind of the state of the fire department at this point in time. So the mission of the Ottumwa Fire Department, oops, don't get click happy, is to serve, preserve, and protect the lives and properties of citizens of Ottumwa. And to fulfill that mission, we need to be fully staffed at all times. And right now, being fully staffed on a normal day is 6 persons per shift. So the makeup of the fire department is 26 personnel. We have 8 3-person shifts, 3 shifts of 8 people, and then the chief and I that work 40 hours, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. And the chief and I also come in anytime it's above a first alarm assignment. As you know, the chief left. Sounds like they have a hazmat incident in Wayne County he took off to go to. So any fires, any major incident, the chief and I are also coming in, as well as calling in off-duty personnel. There are 3 time off slots per day. So if you do that math, we have 8 people working. We allow 3 people off a day. That takes us to 5. So automatically we're calling back in overtime to fill that one slot to keep us at a 6-person minimum. Their personal time off is what PTO is. Could range from 1 to 5 weeks per employee, just depending on how long they've been here. Each employee gets 11 floating holidays. Casual days, 1 to 5, depending on their time. Incentive leave, if they don't use any sick time, they get 1 hour of incentive leave per pay, and it takes 8 hours of incentive leave to get a day off. Comp time and sick leave are other types of personal time off. So with our 6-person minimum per day, we do that to maintain our crew integrity for our 2 in, 2 out procedure. The way that works is South Side has 3 firefighters running on an engine, and the North Side has 3 firefighters working on an engine. That's reduced since our staff cuts 2 years ago when we tried to maintain 7 personnel on duty. So we go to 6, so it's 3 and 3. So if you know how the fire department works, you have a driver, an officer, and then a masked man riding in the back is what we call him. So in the back seat, the guy's showing up to a fire. He's got his air pack on, his mask on. That's how we can go in and make any rescues, put out a fire, go into smoky situations. We never send anyone in alone. So to get 2 in, 2 out, we're sending 2 people in, 1 person off each truck. These numbers that we operate with have become normal for us. These numbers are far lower than what NFPA recommends, which is a total of 15 people per residential structure fire, which we know we'll never get to those numbers. So we do the best we can with what we have. Josh kind of talked about the way the shifts work. So obviously 52 weeks in a year, 24 hours a day, there's a shift on duty. Those shifts are 7 a.m. to 7 a.m. You can kind of, they're a 9-day rotating schedule, Kayla. And each crew kind of have a hierarchy that she made. It's made up of assistant chief, which is at the North Side Fire Station. He's in charge of the crew. He's the shift commander. At the South Side Fire Station, we'll have a captain. He's in charge of 2 firefighters. Depending on the number of staffing for the day, it can depend how the North Side trucks are staffed. That's where we always add staff at the North Side so we can get an aerial in service or run with extra people on the engine to a structure fire. Obviously, we all know where the 2 fire stations are. So the shift commander, like I said, is at Central Fire Station, and Station 2 always has a minimum of 3. And like I said, any extra is going to run out of Central Fire Station. ISO recommends that we run with an aerial and 2 engines. With our current staffing, we're unable to produce those numbers, so we did get dinged a little bit at our last ISO evaluation because we weren't able to put the appropriate number of trucks out the door to each structure fire. It's just some numbers that Josh talked about. As of the last payroll in October, we've accumulated 5,736.46 hours of overtime. That's 212 hours on average per firefighter for those 11 months, and they're averaging 24 hours. So 1 shift or 2 half shifts per month on top of what they're already working on average of 224 hours per month. So that's 1 extra day that they're not able to be with their families, and they're at work. Traditionally, the way the fire departments work, we don't make great money per hour. They're on average, so our firefighters with 15 plus years on are at that $18 to $20 an hour. I would consider firefighting a pretty skilled trade. These guys could be making a lot more money doing something else. So why do we work there? That's our schedule. We like it. They work 24 on, 24 off, and then they have 4 days off in a row. They put a lot of hours in. However, those days off are pretty important when it comes to spending time with your family or simply just not being at work. We all know PTSD and those types of things are something that we try not to talk about in our profession, but they're there. I'm going to guarantee you most of my guys probably got a hint of something, and it's just because of the nature of the job. But we come to the job and we do it every day. These guys have thankfully came in without barking and complaining a lot about working overtime. We haven't had to force anyone in, and they take care of each other. It's a brotherhood. They take care of each other when someone needs time off to go to a baseball game or something for one of their kids. They come in and they cover for them to get, so just like tonight. Josh is here. One of his brother firefighters came in and covered for him so he could come to the council meeting. So what do? Daily, we provide fire suppression, fire education, and fire prevention. ISO requires us to do over 200 hours, like 220 some hours of training per year to maintain our ISO rating. That's 192 hours of training just in basic firefighting, 12 extra hours per driver, 12 extra hours per officer. So we got a required amount of training we have to get done every day that we're there. Currently, we are providing EMT level first response. So every firefighter that's working for us right now is at a minimum EMT. We have a few paramedics left, but as Josh said, most of those were laid off or have quit to move on to departments where they can function as paramedics. For Wapello County, pretty much every hazmat county we cover, we provide technical rescue for them. We carry ropes, high angle rescue, low angle rescue, trench rescue, any type of technical rescue, we're getting the call to go anywhere in those 11 counties. That's another service we provide to those CERG counties is technical rescue because they help pay for the equipment that we have. CERG, Southeast Iowa Response Group, all of our firefighters at this time are hazmat technicians, and we do cover 11 counties in Southeast Iowa, going from Interstate 35, Ringgold and Clark County, clear over to Van Buren and Jefferson counties. So basically the southern 2 tiers of counties we're covering. And I think Tony just left to go to Wayne County. So their daily duties, they show up at 7 a.m. They're there to, first thing they do is going to check their gear and check their, make sure all their equipment's ready to go for the day to respond to any emergency. And then, like I said, training, and more training. Not only are we doing this, but like Josh said, every 2 hours on average, they're running calls. They're responsible keeping the station clean. We try to do most of our own maintenance in-house to small engines, the lawnmowers. We mow our own grass. We keep the station clean on our own. We don't have anyone that comes and cleans our station, anything like that. Everything's done in-house by the firefighters. Another requirement is we go pre-planned buildings. We want to know what our target hazards are. We want to know if we have an emergency in this structure, we want to be prepared for it. We go JBS, John Deere, bottling plant, everywhere, on any of those target hazards annually to do tours to keep up on what our target hazards are so we can be familiar with those places when we do go to them. And always be prepared to respond to an emergency. I hear lots of they get paid to sleep, they get paid to that. I guarantee you these guys aren't sleeping a whole lot in their 24-hour shifts anymore. We're running a call every 2 hours, coming back, writing the report, and then I don't know about you guys, but you jump out of bed, go right on a fire truck with lights and sirens, come back, you're probably not going to fall right back to sleep. So that myth can be debunked pretty quick. Our call volume for last year, a lot of this stuff was in your annual report from last year, so you can kind of refer back to that if you need to. Record year, of course, as always, I say that, but they're all record years anymore for call volume. 4,017 calls for service. That's 3,000 EMS calls, 707 calls for service, which is help ups, installing smoke alarms, doing whatever we do to help out the community, stuff like that. 24 structure fires that last year. We're at 37 or 38 right now for this year because we had one about noon today. 16 vehicle fires, 16 grass fires, 123 false alarms, 119 smoke complaints that if we got a burning ordinance, we could do away with a lot of those, and 2 hazmat team call outs. And we're at like 6 hazmat team call outs this year already. Numbers per station and time frame. Station 2 is our busiest station. Why, I don't know. I attribute it to maybe a little bit of older folks living on the south side, and we have Camelot Towers and South Oak Towers on the south side. So we go to those places quite frequently. So I attribute our south side calls being a little busier because of those two structures that we run a call or two a day too. Nothing there. It's hard to see any trending. I mean, I've looked at these graphs and charts and everything, but if someone could say when you're busy, when you're not busy, it's just hard to tell anymore. Number of incidents by time of day, like I say, looks like 5 to 6 o'clock in the mornings, or 4 to 5 o'clock in the morning is pretty quiet. But nobody knows when a fire is going to break out or grandma's going to fall or anything else. So the reason we're staffed 24 hours a day is because we just don't know when an incident's going to occur. Same as day as the week. Sunday seems pretty quiet, but not much beyond out of the normal there. Like I talked a little bit about SERG. That is a separate entity from the Ottumwa Fire Department. However, it's operated by the Ottumwa Fire Department. Fire chief is the director of SERG, and then all of our members are hazmat technicians. And SERG is funded by 85 cents per person tax levy from every county to the tune of, what, Kayla, 100 and something thousand a year. That's what that's funded about. However, with that 100 and something thousand a year, we've acquired lots of nice equipment. I'd hate to put a number on it, but we're well into the millions of dollars worth of equipment that we've acquired since hazmat was started right at 30 years ago. Our apparatus, 100-foot aerial platform, which we purchased in 2014. It's got about 10,000 miles on it, still in good shape. 65-foot aerial ladder is what we just voted on last council meeting, I believe, to replace. It's a 1996 Pierce, and the aerial's out of service on it. 2 engine pumpers, one's new this year, the other one's 2003, and it's got approximately 117,000 miles on it. The rescue squad at Station 2, 2 chief's vehicles, 2 hazmat response vehicles, 2 brush trucks, and 2 rescue boats. Finance Director Ms. Mulder is going to talk a little bit about the general fund and how we're paid for.
So I just kind of wanted to recap kind of where we've been at these last couple of years. And when I started here almost 2 years ago now, in about 10 days, I've been here about 2 years, I walked into a pretty large deficit in our general fund. And there was already a lot of conversation about how we were going to balance our budget, lots of meetings happening, lots of cuts happening, and there's just a large deficit. We started working on the FY20 budget. At the time, it was going to be a $1.2 million deficit for that fiscal year, unless we made some pretty drastic changes. Council made some hard decisions. We did a lot of work. We ended up only being $877,000 deficit in that fiscal year. But then in FY21, starting that year, July 1st, we cut multiple staff in the general fund, including 6 firefighters. And there are 6 other people in the general fund also that were cut that year. Fortunately, there were a lot of other decisions that were made and a lot of changes that were made during last fiscal year. And we ended up having over $1 million surplus, which is $1.95 million swing between the fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21. Coming to the current fiscal year that we just started, July 1st, we pretty much have a balanced budget this year. We are still trending with that balanced budget, except for our largest expense that is over right now in the general fund is our fire overtime in our Department 150, which, go to the next slide, Edward. Which this is kind of just the fire annual salary and benefits and where their funds come from. So that general fund levy, that is fire's wages only. That comes from the general fund on an annual basis. And I go all the way back to fiscal year 18. on there. And then the benefits fund, that's where their health and retirement and other benefits are paid from. The liability fund, that is where their workers' comp is paid from. And then we pulled out the overtime cost. So if you go back to when we cut and reduced the firefighters by 6, starting that July 1st, 2020, we thought that those wages from the general fund would be well over $200,000 savings, upwards to maybe $300,000 savings out of the general fund. When in reality, because of the overtime, we've only saved $75,000 between fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21. The benefits fund was reduced by $90,000 between those 2 years. And if we go with a trend for our current fiscal year, we could be well over $120,000 over where we were in fiscal year 20, with only a reduction of about $50,000 in our benefits fund. So if you average out what our first to third year firefighters' wages, about $50,000 annually, we could hire 3 firefighters. That's costing us much less than what we paid last year and what we're trending towards this year for firefighters. So fiscal year 21, last year, that ended June 30th of this current year, we had overtime of $221,000. And again, if we would have had 3 firefighters, that would have cost us about $150,000 or less in the general fund. And then again, in this current fiscal year, through the end of October, we've already paid $117,000, almost $118,000 in overtime costs for our fire department. If that trend continues, as Josh mentioned, it could be well above $350,000 for this year. And honestly, as you guys saw in the last slide, we have a balanced budget in our general fund. So if we go above budget by that much, our general fund, we're going to have to make some other decisions. We're going to be fine, but basically it would be more cost effective for us to have the 3 firefighters. The other thing I want to point out is before we had these cuts, you will see the 3 previous fiscal years, how much we spent on overtime. So in FY18, it was about $50,000. FY19 is almost $18,000. And then FY20, it was $32,557. So immediately when we had the reduction in staff, it was almost 7 times more in overtime that we had expensed. Josh mentioned a little bit about their FLSA overtime. That's also more than doubled because of the amount of time off that they can or cannot take right now, plus the number of hours that they have to work consecutively. So in FY21, again, we more than doubled that FLSA overtime. And then in FY22, it's probably going to quadruple that FLSA overtime. The injury pay, again, has probably tripled in the last 2 years for the firefighters as well.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions or comments that council want to make? Phil, do you want to
There
make
is
any?
one more thing. Yep.
She was
Okay.
just in the middle. So I do have one more slide, I think. Oh, it's just a video. You can play it if you want while I talk, Edward. But so approximately 1 month ago, the chief and I approached the union president and vice president. Basically what we said is, guys, if we go to city council and we talk about hiring 3 guys, are you okay? What do you want? Do you want overtime money? And do you want to work all the time? Or do you want to hire 3 people? And it was pretty unanimous. They came back and said, we want you to hire 3 people because we want our days off. So just want to let you know, I know in previous years, contract negotiations, those things, wages was brought up and was a big high ticket item. However, I think we've shown here that the days off are going to be a lot more beneficial for our firefighters than making the extra money in overtime. So does anyone have any questions?
When was your last vacation?
What was your question?
When was your last vacation?
Oh, mine? I don't take any. The guys, it's tough when they're getting called in for overtime. So we're scheduling overtime, try to schedule it a month out. So they know, hey, I'm going on vacation. Can somebody else cover my overtime and those things? So it's all a lot of planning and a lot of forward thinking on their part of, trying to schedule family events and those kinds of things. So when they're not on their regular days on, what they got going on. So.
Yeah, I guess just before taking some questions, just want to kind of follow up on the presentation there and Josh's comments as well. So overtime is definitely one of those things that we don't want to have to pay. I mean, no one ever wants to really have to pay overtime. But I also don't want the council or the public to be disillusioned that hiring 3 people is going to eliminate the overtime. I mean, as you see, even when we had 6 people, there was still overtime. It was much less, but there was still overtime. A lot of our overtime, I'd say probably a majority of it, has been because of staffing, filling shifts with people that have been off due to injury, either on the job or off the job. And we have had some extended times, months, where that was 3 shifts a week or 56 hours a week that were having to be covered. So if we hire 3 people, you got the cost of that will eat into the overtime, definitely. But when we have structure fires and need to call people in, when we have, some of those things, when we have people that are taking off and there was somebody already scheduled off or somebody gets sick, there will still be some of that overtime. So I don't want anyone to be disillusioned about that. The other thing is we have looked since back when the first cuts were made there about looking at other options, other alternatives. We had a conversation talking about part-time. Looked at that very seriously and met with the union representation, and there were some concerns that I think were legitimate at the time that didn't make a lot of sense to move and try to bring people in part-time. That wasn't going to necessarily solve all of that issue either. So we have looked at some other alternatives here. And I think it still comes down to, in the end, bottom line, overtime is one line item in the budget, in the general fund budget. I think if we're looking at bringing on 3 full-time staff people, we do need to still look at how can we increase that revenue line. We may be able to absorb some of that, but we're paying out overtime instead of paying out salaries. That's just shifting that same burden. So I think we still need to look at how can we increase that revenue, and for public safety, definitely. But as I mentioned earlier, the general fund budget covers a lot of other things, and we're still tapped out to the maximum level there. So whether it's helping police, fire, or any of the other functions in the general fund, that revenue is going to be important. And I'm going to float this out there tonight. We've talked about it just in passing before. City Council has taken action on it, but it's something that I'm going to be working on to very seriously bring forward, and that is looking at franchise fees as something that the city, I think, needs to consider. There are a number of other communities that are our size. It's a way to help take on and bring in some additional revenue and offset some of that aspect there. Public safety is one of the 7 or 8 things that is an eligible revenue source, revenue purpose statement that we could use for franchise fees. And that will help not only now, but in the future for fire department, for any other services we're looking at adding in, or just taking on all the other, extra services that we've got in place. So I just want to float that out there. I think that may be an opportunity for revenue that will help us resolve this issue. And I do support bringing on the 3 additional staff members at this time.
Okay, I'd like some clarification though, because I think what we've heard tonight is a staffing issue specifically.
Yeah.
And you're saying we need to consider bringing 3 people on. How does that fit in with the issue that we were on the agenda talking about ambulance services? Because that seems to me to be more work for you guys, less revenue. So I'm confused as to why we're mixing apples and oranges. I mean, I support the fact we may need some additional firefighters.
Yeah.
But that's separate from ambulance services.
Yeah, so I believe, like I tried to mention a little bit earlier in the beginning, earlier this year, there was a question about staffing concerns with Ormix and how that played into things.
But that's been resolved.
But yes, the
At least
hospital
the hospital
has-
administrator told us that on a phone conversation this week.
Correct.
Last week.
Correct. Yes, but that's still what I think it did is it opened the door looking at if the city was to do a bigger role with ambulance services, and if that opportunity for transports and other things was there, that would have been a revenue source to look at for bringing on additional staffing. Now, I don't know if that was specifically what was maybe thought or looked at, but that definitely would have been one of the options. And I think that conversation started going that way. And at that time had reached out with hospital administration to verify if that was something that was of interest. Because if we could partner with the hospital on that, and it made sense for both the city and the hospital, then everybody would win in that resolve. So that's kind of where things were at. But after talking with them and finding out that there wasn't an interest there, that we're better off continuing on as we are and maybe still enhancing our services a little bit to help with what they're doing, that's going to be a better partnership, but still left that issue with revenue. And that's where I was saying, I think that the franchise fee is a way to address the revenue issue, resolve our staffing concerns, and does not put any pressure on the ambulance on Ormix, who my understanding is they are doing a good job. A couple of years ago, there were some deficiencies in the service. Those have been resolved, and they had a clean bill of health and have improved their service over the last couple of years.
Yes, Councilman Myers, go ahead.
Well, I'd like to ask Administrator Rath a question, and then I have a couple of questions for Assistant Chief Corey, and then as others have, I have a few other questions. But back to the point of why I had heard we were coming, which was to talk about the potential again of, the fire department, if not taking over ambulance, what part it would be. But before I get to that, Mr. Rath, downstairs we were talking and joking a little bit. I brought up a question about concealed carry 3 months or more ago, and it hasn't ever come up. And I understand it may yet before I leave. But I heard here tonight, this presentation came forward because of the request of one council member. And the new council needs to know, isn't there a percentage of council people required to bring forward, or were there more than one and I just heard one tonight?
So I'll answer that, actually. I brought it up during a council meeting, and I believe it was Councilman Dalby and Councilwoman Berg that said that they would appreciate having this conversation as well.
That's correct.
All right, thank you for the clarification. Assistant Chief Corey, history, which a lot of people don't like history these days, but 16 years ago, about when we did look at fire ordinance and passed the one that we 16 years later still have in place, you made a comment, and I think we have to be very careful with what we do with figures. But I think I heard you say that, for instance, if we had a complete ban on fires, then the fire calls you get for smoke and stuff, that would be less calls you have to make.
Correct.
But when you do that, it also was true then and it's true now. Because of the way it's written, a person could drive around town and call you, they don't want fire burning at all. They could call you in 8 times and that counts as eight complaints.
Correct.
Even though it's a person who doesn't want. The second question I had for you, and again, this is informational because I was also, as this presentation has been going on, I'm like, good heavens, why didn't we hire 3 or 4 more people, firemen, and get the squads what they should be? Because overtime is going to be about what those 2 to 4 people would cost. But anyway, one other revenue source over these years was the fire department was going to have the capacity, the ability during a vehicle accident to charge. And that could be another source of revenue. And
We do.
we do?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any kind of a category as to
how much revenue we get out of that a year, or
It's not a lot.
it is not?
No, between fire inspections and car accidents and things, it's less than 5,000.
Okay. Because I know at the time we did that, the discussion was, well, if that vehicle was out of county, that charge could be maybe different than if it was a
Yeah,
local.
I can't give you that exact dollar
But
figure
that
at this
is
point,
one
but it's
other
not
thing you tried to do.
We do, yep. We have some small things we charge for, hazmat and car accidents, fire inspections,
okay.
fire alarms, those kind of things that
Okay.
we are billing for.
Okay.
They're just not a large number.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
Other comments? Yeah, Mark?
So thank you, everybody that spoke tonight. I want to say, from going back to the budget piece of this, I want to make it clear to the public that when we made the decision that we made to cut the fire positions, that was strictly a financial decision. I know that there's been a lot of mixed communication about that over the last year or so. I want to set that record straight out of the get-go here. We made a decision based on the best knowledge that we had, which unfortunately, we had a brand new finance director, we had a brand new city administrator that were coming in, and we find out that the financial information that we were trying to make our best knowledge decision off of wasn't exactly the best. And we found out a lot of areas for improvement over the last year and a half as a result of that. So I went back and reviewed that series of council meetings just to make sure. And it's very clear in reviewing those council minutes that every person that made that decision for making those cuts at that time had stated, if we were in a better financial position, we will look to hire those firefighters back. Because again, just speaking for myself here, none of us felt good about that decision. None of us wanted to make the decision, but we felt that that's what was necessary at the time. The rest of what I'm going to say here goes back to conversations that we had regarding the police department, which took place 6 or 8 months prior to that. When we look at let's get money out of the way here. One of the issues that we were having with the police department at that time was extreme fatigue by the police officers. We were having police officers that were on the verge of making critical mistakes, safety related, because they were so tired and so overworked. We had police officers that were leaving. They were leaving en masse, actually. I think Chief Farrington can probably speak to that. We were averaging, one every month and a half that was leaving the force because they were just tired of working so many hours. So I think that those are things that we need to take into consideration. I agree. There's going to be overtime, and overtime's healthy. In any business, a certain level of overtime is healthy. There comes a point though where overtime becomes catastrophic, and I think that that's the point that we're at right now. We've tipped that scale where it's becoming catastrophic. So, $117,000, as Josh Chance said, and it was verified up here in 4 months. That's bad. And we've got, with the injuries out, we run the risk with people leaving the force. We've got, no offense to any of the firefighters in here, we've got an aging firefighter force. Sorry, I saw the gray hair and I had to say it. But no, on a serious note, we have an aging firefighter force. Here in a couple, 3 years, we're going to be looking at new firefighters. If we're not starting to train those people now, we have no succession planning if we don't do something at this point. So especially if we're going to consistently have firefighters out for injury. So that's a concern from a human resources perspective that I have. That's kind of where I'm at with the firefighters. I think that we do need to bring those 3 firefighters back. I'd fully support that. Speaking to the ambulance service, since that's what's on the agenda, I'm concerned about that. I know that we had talked about having a due diligence on the ambulance service, the feasibility of having it. And I appreciate Ottumwa Regional's perspective that they don't intend to give up the ambulance service. But with that said, I'm a little disappointed that Ottumwa Regional, since this directly impacts them, I'm a little bit disappointed that they didn't show up here tonight to speak, because, you know, I just look at JBS, who's the largest employer in the community. When the Bonita project came on the agenda, we had 5 or 6 representatives from JBS here. We're talking about something that directly affects their business, and they're utilizing our staff, the city staff, to the tune of 45, 46 times over the last 3 months. And I'm questioning who actually has the liability if something goes awry with that. And they didn't bother to show up here to discuss that tonight. That's a concern to me. Now, I'm not saying that I'm for or against ambulance service. I know it would be a huge investment, and which would probably require hiring even more firefighters. But you know, just to say we're not going to pursue seeing what this is going to take because Ottumwa Regional said so is not a good idea in my mind. You know, they put themselves in the position. They put themselves in the position to be critically short-staffed. That wasn't the city of Ottumwa that did that. That wasn't the taxpayers of the city of Ottumwa that did that. Yet the city of Ottumwa and the taxpayers of Ottumwa are the ones paying the price because they don't have the appropriate level of staff. So that's a concern to me. And again, I cannot stress this enough. I'm very disappointed that Ottumwa Regional had no representation here tonight.
Bill, can you address that?
Yeah, real quick. They fully did intend to be here tonight. I had a call earlier today that there was a conflict that came up that Dennis was not able to make it, and the person he was planning to have come in his place went home sick. So that was not intentional. They were fully intending to be here tonight and have been participating in those conversations.
Can I interrupt for just a second?
Yeah.
An entire sector of their business is being discussed tonight. You would think that they would show up for that.
Well, again, like I said, I mean, that was the intention, and it didn't work out for them tonight. I had encouraged them to put together some kind of report and even bring it back before council, just to explain what is going on with their service and, you know, some of the wins and successes that they've had, because I think that's important to know as well. And I'll encourage them to make a presentation to council in the future.
Just to end on this, I want to say that I think that if this sort of business arrangement is going to be the standard going into the future, then there needs to be some sort of written agreement between the city of Ottumwa and Ottumwa Regional Health Center that removes the liability from the city of Ottumwa if a worst case happens and one of our firefighters is injured or property is injured or property is destroyed, that we're held harmless for that. And possibly even repayment to the taxpayers for utilizing our staff members to do their job.
Any other comments?
Your Honor, I got a couple things here. That's a lot to unpack here tonight. But going back real quickly, I remember those meetings, budget meetings, meetings with the union, fire department, even contract negotiations as an observer, you know, watching all that happen. And as Councilman Rose said, we had a lot of stuff going wrong at the same time. And I remember not only with the fire department, we had valuation in the city declining to 1% to 3% per year. It's not very hard to project that out over so many years to figure out that our general fund would have been in a negative balance. That is not a place you want to see a city in ever. And at the same time, as Mark Rowe alluded to, we had a problem with the PD to where we were losing officers. I don't believe our pay was nearly as competitive as it should have been to retain those officers. And at the same time, we couldn't recruit any because they would look at our offer and say, well, that's not even close to it. So we couldn't get any officers. And to put it all in a nutshell, I'm not even going to describe what kind of sandwich we were eating or we're looking at. at that time, but we all had to look at it and take a bite of it. And none of us liked that. It was a terrible decision, but we had to act in the best interest of the city, in the best interest of the finance, to get the ship righted and to get back on course. And I think we did that. Unfortunately, it cost jobs and people that we critically needed, and the experience that Josh alluded to was you can't replace that. But during those meetings, we also not only projected what our financials might be, we also run scenarios in those budget meetings. You know, if this, then what? For instance, we knew a lot of these things would be happening. We knew overtime would be going up. We knew firefighters would be getting tired. We just didn't know how long that we could, you know, forego keeping those folks on board and letting our budget level itself off. And again, this was no fault of the council, no fault of the city. The value of our homes were decreasing. That means less revenue in the general fund. The general fund fully supports public safety, 100%. So we had less dollars. So we had to make that decision. And as Marco said, it wasn't a good one that any of us wanted to make, but we did it. But out of those meetings and all those scenarios we ran, we knew we would be here at a point today looking at these very things. And we made a commitment. We had a consensus as a council and as a city at that time to commit to bring those levels back up when we could. And I think not only as a city and the council, we should make good on the commitments we make, not only for us, but for the people that the fire department serves. Same with the police department. I think the taxpayers and the public show us support during that time. It was pretty obvious to see that people cared for their public safety and they wanted them fully staffed to do the job they pay taxes for them to do. And I think it's good that we're in this position, but I think we know the figures. We've been over them a million times. We predicted we would be here one of these days. So this is not news. This is nothing we have to further research. And I think as a council, we should move to do that along with everybody else's consensus. And I take it a step further and say by the meeting and by our next meeting on December 7th, I would like to see as a council member a resolution or whatever on the agenda to hire back no less than 3 positions at the fire department, starting immediately. Because we have to think about what it's going to take to get these firefighters in here, even if we get applicants, get them through all their training, get them through all the, you know, the employment hoops that we have to go through and get them on the job. You know, we may be lucky to get them by February, depending on when we start this process. I don't think we need to wait on this. This has to happen now. And I think we need to make good on our commitment, not only to the employees, but to the taxpayers who supported that decision then. One more thing on ambulance services, and then I'll retire for the evening. You know, this is a tough one, but I think there's some more variables nowadays that we have to look at. When we went to Fort Dodge all those years ago and looked at that, the service, a lot of times as a city, we are reactive instead of proactive on a lot of things. And that has been a downfall of ours for years. And this is an opportunity, I believe, with ambulance services, not to come in and snatch a service away from somebody, but one to where we need to be prepared that if that service doesn't continue on, and it hasn't in different communities. Some communities have given it totally up. Some haven't. But if that day ever comes, we have to be prepared, because if that does get dropped in our lap, we've got 25,000 plus people out there expecting somebody to be in a truck to their home when they have an emergency. And if we have to try to search and scramble to get things put together, you know, at 6 months minimum to get something put together, those people are going to die because of that. And I don't want to see that happen. So I think what we need to do in this situation, just my opinion, I only got a month left on the city council, but I'm going to put it out there. We need to be ready. I think we need to look at future scenarios of what it might cost to acquire capital, such as an ambulance, what the staffing levels would cost the city, put together the best performer we can on what it would be to take on that. I'm not saying we should, but gosh darn, we need to be prepared for it. Because, and I haven't asked the question, I know there's a Senate file out there that really leaves no choice for cities once an entity plans on dropping that or removing that from their list of services. We've got to pick up the ball and go with it. We now have no choice. Public safety is now an essential service. So I want to make sure that we're ready, and I hope the new council takes the same approach, that we are ready in case that happens. It is very critically important to the safety of our people, which is what we are all up here to do. Number one is public safety. So that's where I stand on those 2 issues. I would like to see that on the agenda next meeting, to hire 3 full-time, no less than 3 full-time firefighters. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
So Mayor, if I can get Sandra to hold off a few minutes, because
You know I had something
of what
to
my
say, right?
colleagues had said, no, and I think what you say is going to be important, but because 2 of my colleagues have brought up some points that I don't agree with, in my opinion. I'm not saying I'm right. I don't agree with them. And Matt, I would hope that even though I want to see the firemen hired, I would hope we don't do it in December. Because I will go back to one of the reasons we hired Mr. Rath was his real strong belief and emphasis on priority budgeting. And so this new council is going to have to step up to, in fact, developing and passing a new budget. And they need to see. Besides you getting a feather in your cap, Matt, and I'm not meant to hurt your feelings, but
Trust
I'm
me, you're
just
not going to
going
hurt my
back,
feelings.
like I said, history that you guys don't remember, apparently, is we had a finance director and an administrator when a couple of council people were running around in police cars and fire trucks and getting really close to know, that didn't even ask the police chief at the time or some others what the real information was or whatever. They got one side. So we had a finance director and a city administrator that said, oh gosh, you can't do what you want to do with the police department. You can't do what you want to do with the fire department because we don't have the money. But you know what? We went ahead and did it. And so then a couple of years later, when those very people step forward and they say, hey, we don't have the money. Well, then you get caught in the position that we had to cut the people. So we have to be darn careful about, we say future plans. Well, we weren't looking very far ahead, even though I understood your good points, Matt. We can't hire people. They don't want to come here. Well, guess what? We didn't have the money, but we went ahead and did it. And then I'll close with the ambulance thing. It is the damnedest thing I've ever heard. And Mark Rowe, it's like, have you always worked for government agencies? Because we in the government are awfully good about spending other people's money. Ottumwa Regional happens to be, and it bounces back and forth, whether it's the third or second largest employee. Those figures drop between they and John Deere. And it's like, they are a for-profit business in this town. Between the hospital facilities, clinic, they pay almost $1 million in property tax. And yet, well, but we think the fire department, it would help, and now I'll have more firemen mad at me, it'll help them account for the positions that they need. When we've got a business that is providing that service. And Mark, when you start throwing around what they do or what they don't do and why the firemen then have to step in, you don't know Ottumwa Regional side of it. I have gone over, that's the other disappointing thing to me. I think this is the third time in the last 3 years that this has been brought up, that they want to take it over. Oh, Fort Dodge. Fort Dodge asked the fire department to take it over. Our for-profit business is not asking for it to be taken over.
Can I talk now, Bob?
Please, I'm sorry.
Sandra, you have the floor.
Thank you.
I am so thankful for you, Kayla, because the proof is in the pudding. Thanks for these numbers. It's right before me, so I see what's going on. And one thing I would prefer for these firefighters to come to my home well rested to put out my fire. I'm put that in your lap. But the second thing is, I didn't hear them ask for the ambulance service. Is that something you guys want?
It's been discussed,
It's
yes.
been discussed that that's something that could be a possibility.
Yes, just looking into the future what ifs.
Okay, into the future, Bob. It's the future.
So in that
Just be
regard,
thankful.
Sandra, were you
Yes. No,
finished?
I'm good. I'm good.
I want you to have all the time you need.
No, I am just, I want them to come to my house rested. But right now, in their condition, they can't come that way. If they hired a 3 out of 6 that lost their jobs and hired just half of them, I think that's a good middle point for us to start. So I'm all for that.
I want to make a couple of comments based on what Councilman Myers said. Specific to the one-sided conversations that he said that was going on, I know which council people he was referring to. And I'll look to Chief Farrington for verification on this. I cannot recall the number of times that we sat with, at the time, Lieutenant Farrington and Chief McAndrew with Administrator Morris and had discussions with all of them present. It was never a one-sided conversation. I just want to throw that out there. And the other thing, I agree with you that Ottumwa Regional is our largest employer in Ottumwa. And or they might not be the largest employer, but they're probably one of the largest
Second or third.
and probably one of the largest tax-paying bodies of Ottumwa. But with that being said, every time Ottumwa Regional's been brought up, and I'm trying not to put Ottumwa Regional in the middle of this, to counter what you're saying, I would argue with you, Bob, that every time that they've been brought up, you have acted like they're supposed to be exempt from any accountability in the community because they are the size of taxing body that they are. I don't really care how big of a taxing body or a taxed entity a company is. They still have a certain responsibility to the community in which they reside and conduct business. It has no bearing on me how big or small their tax bill is. They still have a level of accountability.
So I think we do need to hear from them directly. I'm disappointed and saddened that they were not here tonight, because when we had a phone conversation with them last week, they were going to bring Dave Howard, who is the director of Ormex, Lori Bailey, who is the director of nursing services, and Dennis Hunger, who is the CEO, because Phil and I asked these very same tough questions on the phone. And I think I make a couple of comments. They are a community partner. We need to support them the best we can. And we need to hold them accountable. And we did ask them about their deficiencies and their timelines. We also asked about staffing and their benefits, because the rumor is that they were not paying well and they were not giving good benefits, so they were losing people by the groves, according to our staff. So I asked that question. They were not losing staff. They have one opening right now. Another one is being filled. And I think they need the opportunity to have a fair and open discussion with our staff, because staffing for the fire department is one subject. Ambulance service is a whole nother issue. We've got to look at that. And I would say to the fire department very clearly, and I said this a couple of years back, give us a plan. A plan includes data. I want to know how many calls, for what reasons. I want to know how much it costs to do the startup, the initial capital investment. I want to know what the operational costs are. And I want to know what the personnels are, because we were told if you run an ambulance service, you have to have somebody that meets the Medicaid requirements and monitors all the medications that are carried on an ambulance. That means additional personnel for us or somebody. It means that we have to have equipment that meets state standards, and I got a copy of those just today. I didn't want to have somebody else give me the information. I asked the Department of Health. They sent me the 66-item checklist that they use to monitor any ambulance service. We need to have a plan that really outlines what we do, and I agree with Matt. We should be prepared that if something does change, we could pick it up. But if they're not asking us to do it and they're meeting the state standards, I don't think we as a city government have any business interfering with them. They're a private business. Just like I wouldn't go and interfere with Josh's private business. That's not our role. That's not something government should do. Government has a very specific agenda in terms of providing city services. So I think until they get a chance, and I will certainly ask Phil and I can contact Mr. Hunger and ask him to show up in person or whoever they can send next time and give some response to this, because there are a lot of accusations that I think are unfair and inaccurate, and they need to have a chance, just like anybody. You could get due diligence. You get to come in and make your own case. And nobody's ever heard from them, at least to my knowledge, on the council. Has anybody talked to anybody from the hospital? I'm not aware of it. I asked that question too, if they, because they specifically mentioned people from our staff who were making comments about the city's position. And I said, unless it comes from Phil, or in some cases from me as mayor, it doesn't carry any weight, because they don't have the authority to make statements about what the city's going to do until it's been voted on by the city council. So I think there's a misconception about that too. So let's get them here. Let's give them a chance to answer any question, just like we did tonight. I think we had a good discussion. I really appreciate the information that Josh gave us because it was personal and very specific. It helps us understand what we're dealing with, but I think it's very similar to the police department. We don't want our staff to get burned out. So let's kind of put that on hold right now and continue this discussion at the December 7th or later meeting. And welcome aboard, new council and mayor. You have a lot to deal with.
Your Honor, I got another question, and I
Sure.
don't want to carry this out any farther, but I want to respond to Councilman Myers too, but I want to thank Kayla for giving us some honest numbers. I have never met, and I've only worked for 2 finance directors, but I've never met another finance director who is accurate for the people, for the taxpayer, as we are all our taxpayers, and I pay a chunk of taxes too, for doing a great job and not overlooking a cent and a dime and making it work for the people of Ottumwa. Which leads me back to my response to Councilman Myers. You know, we as a council can't only focus on what we're told. We have to get into the numbers and see for ourselves. And I think Councilman Rowe and myself and Stevens, and even you, Bob Myers, have all done our homework as best we can. But as far as finance directors goes, I know you made an issue and a point to say that one told us we never had any money. But we also had one that overlooked $1 million in garbage revenue fees at the same time telling us we were broke. So I think it's important that we all, as council, mayor, trust but verify. I know that's one of the mayor's favorite lines, but you have to do that because if you trust, blindly trust, you'll miss $1 million in garbage fees that would never have been collected in the city of Ottumwa. $1 million is a lot to overlook, and I guarantee you Kayla Mulder won't overlook that. So again, I think at our next discussion, we need to look at this new Senate file to know where we're at as far as federal or for state law and what we're required to do in essential services. But I do plan on following the recommendation of our finance director. I've always tried to do that, and I think when she says the light's green to hire firefighters, I think time to go. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Matt. Good comments. Okay, is there any closing comments? That topic has been pretty well discussed tonight. Thank you all for who are in the audience and the council and staff. We did have, was there one more comment? Lester, were you going to make a comment? You waved your hand when I asked if there was any other from the audience. So identify yourself, please. We'll give you 3 minutes to say whatever you want to say.
Lester, Dan Hartog. To start with, I've had 3 phone calls today. Want to know why you were going to vote on the TIF tonight. And they didn't even know it till the paper come out. They were all excited about that. And you can see I'm pretty near last man standing after that last council meeting. I don't know how many people's got a hold of me. But anyway, the TIF is the reason. It's not that they don't want that built. And you just got through saying that how much revenue we're getting out of the hospital and the revenue we're getting out of that, but we're not going to do anything for the hospital, but we're helping JBS build this thing.
We're not helping at this point.
Backing up their taxes. Mr. Myers, Councilman Myers, was on the radio and he said, well, people are against this because they don't want it in my backyard. So I had to go. I don't run. I walked. There's 42 houses total. East Rochester, North Court, Bonita, 42 houses. You had 768 signatures. Those people are against the TIF. They're not against building that thing. They don't want the taxes spent. You come out tonight, you can hire 2 firefighters for that $175,000 a year. I figured it up. They're making $88,000. $175,000 in taxes every year will pay for them 2 firefighters. It's the TIF they're against. It's not the building. Oh, no doubt, Councilman Myers is right. There's probably 42 of them that don't want that. But stuff happens. Mm-hmm. That's a big deal. But boy, they were really against somehow in that vote. I don't know if you want to, can you postpone until next time? Because then people are really upset about that. They think you're trying to run something under them. And on the other hand, I hope Chief Farrington don't get up and tell about how short he is. Scared me to death in the fire department. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone that wants to talk about something that we haven't covered tonight? We always give people a chance for public comment on any city business. Okay, a couple of things just to highlight. I think we had a great lighting of the trees in Central Park this past week, and I want to compliment again Fred Zessinger and the Main Street people who worked hard to get that done. It was a really nice activity and a very touching ceremony for some of our deceased people. Remind you that this is a busy season for Bridgeview. We have a lot of activity going on there, so if you're not sure, and I'm not going to try to give you dates, Holly Berg usually does that for me, but you can get on Meet Ottumwa and see the dates and all the activities that are going on over there. Today was Andy Wartenberg's last day in the city. He is moving on to another position in North Carolina, so we're going to miss him. He's done a great job for us. And I want to compliment the engineering department and the street department. Marion Street is open, and if you haven't driven on Marion Street in the last couple of weeks, take a drive down Marion. And those of you who have driven on it in the past know that it was like a washboard. It was so bad you could hardly drive it. But it's really a great improvement and very expensive, but it looks good, and I think it's the kind of improvement we want to see more of in the community. Now, for the agenda for the 7th, a couple of things I need to bring up. I will ask our city clerk to be sure that we have on there an item for reviewing City Administrator Phil Rath and sending that out so we can actually do the evaluation on the 21st meeting. My understanding from what I've heard from individual councils, you want to do the appointment of the 4th vote getter in terms of the next council seat. So that would fill Mr. Myers' unexpired term. And also, I am going to ask that we take a moment and look at city clerk situation and review that with the council. So if there's something else that I need to be made aware of, please do that and we'll get you the agenda as soon as we can. Okay. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes.
Councilmember Pope?
Yes.
Thank you and good night. And I have 7:06.